I think it lets our people understand the legislative process, mainly, number one, and then also it's to bring to the attention of Congress and the State Department people that, hey, everything is not well down on the farm. We still have problems, and that's basically why we're here, to address those problems. Interest rate, export markets, and generally, the net income for farmers is just in bad shape.
We won't forget that the problems, and for example, I've often said that the best farm bill that Congress could enact would be a balanced federal budget, because if I know anything about farmers, and I come from a farm family, it is that they want to be left alone. They don't want to be propped up, but they don't understand this kind of government that we've had for the last 35 or 40 years in Washington, D.C.
We were about to leave to go home, and then this man, all of a sudden we were in the car in the middle of the parking lot. He was yelling, "Go back, go back!" So we started running back in and everything, and everybody was getting up against the wall, praying. Everybody was laying on top of each other. It seemed like it lasted forever.
We pulled into the circle, and we saw the devastation, and all we could think about were the kids in the gym. The power lines were down. We didn't know whether anyone was hurt. My heart leaped in my hands.
We saw them display more determination to vote than I've ever seen, and make me feel ashamed of my own lack of respect for the right to vote. I know from asking around at these polling places I went to, perhaps 20, that each party, all of the parties, think that it was a fair election. There was bureaucracy involved in the way they themselves decided to set up the election, and perhaps there'll be 10% less votes cast than the last time because of that, and because of heavy guerrilla action.
Judge Gordon's order comes in response to a petition filed by Secretary of State Don Siegelman, who was afraid that not all probate judges would send in the votes on budget isolation. Mr. Siegelman called the ruling a victory for the people.
Clearly, the people of Alabama have won the first round. We can claim victory. The process is working. I think we have to give thanks that we live in a country where we have an independent judiciary system which has the power to check and to balance the power in the executive and legislative branches of government.
But the Secretary of State and either the Governor or the Attorney General must count the votes by 5 p.m. Wednesday. The Governor's legal advisor, Ken Wallace, says the Chief Executive will show up if invited and if a convenient time can be arranged.
The law does not require that the governor certify or proclaim on Wednesday. He would have some reasonable length of time thereafter in which he would take action under the Constitution, and we would hope that we could get a final ruling of the court prior to that time. Certainly the governor wants to do what is legal in this instance. He thinks that he has done everything that's been legal up to this point, and now that it is in litigation, we want the court to instruct us on what the proper action is.
To force the matter back into court this afternoon, the governor's attorneys asked Judge Gordon to hear the case again and ask for a Friday deadline for attorneys to submit briefs. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
involved in voting against the other. There has been a time when some group said we're going to kill the governor's bills here and there. Well, we worked that out. Now we come back to another 2 or 3 weeks. We got another threat, and I'm not going to yield to any of those intimidations and threats. I'm going to go my own way. I'm going to veto some legislation that they didn't think I was going to veto now, and I've got enough votes we have to pass both of those bills without anybody that didn't vote for it the other day, with the exception of 3 or 4 that are going to vote for it that didn't. We hadn't twisted anybody's arm, and don't have to. Association, the executive director. By the people, and they will be adopted when they understand that it's going to do a great job for the masses of people. I would say that anybody worth got 500,000, and I believe that when people know that, when they know that, some taxes, you know, they're going to have copies of this.
Some of them got it. We pulled most of it out when we came in here, but I think there's enough copies for them.
Come from those more able to pay. We've had an agreement. And computer education and other programs which are included in my recommended budget. The second part of the bill is the creation of the governor's education reform to establish scholarships for attracting undergraduate students to the teaching field and tuition and some taxes, you know. This is the... and in my judgment, when people understand that these 2 amendments submitted to them are not taxes that are going to further burden the little average Alabamian who worked hard every day for a living, but is going to tax those who are more able to pay and are willing to pay and feel it's in their best interest and all the people's best interest to provide more money from these sources that never have provided money for education in the past. That we hope will be submitted to the people of Alabama.
Charles McMurtry and his brother Fred have owned and operated this Shell station for 15 years. They act as middlemen between Shell and the customer. They buy from Shell, then resell to you. Right across the street from them are an Amoco and a Texaco station, but the McMurtrys don't really consider them a threat since they all share similar middleman conditions. The McMurtrys say the competition comes from the Crown station down the street where there essentially is no middleman. Crown Oil owns and operates the station and doesn't face the middleman markup. The McMurtrys and others agree that the Crown station's pricing advantage was the reason this old Union 76 station had to close down.
When you can control it from the refining all the way into the retailing, naturally people like myself cannot compete with them, and that's the only thing we want to do. We want them out of retailing. They can stay in wholesaling or exploration, anything they want to, but we just want them out of retailing.
The McMurtrys and the other service station owners are pushing a bill in the legislature which would divorce Crown and other oil refinery-owned stations from the retail business. Stations like 7-Elevens, Eccles, KOs, and Zippy Marts.
The intent is to put their competition out of business.
Johnny Johnson represents the Alabama Petroleum Council, the state association for oil companies, and he says if Crown is forced to sell its stations and use a middleman, its gas prices at the pump will go up, perhaps as much as a nickel a gallon.
Both sections of that bill are designed to raise prices in the marketplace.
If they drive all of the little people like us out of business, then they can control the price and set it at anything they want to. But as long as we're here, people will have a choice.
Unlike most other legislative battles, this war is expanding into a media war brought right into your home.
What do you think's going to happen to the price of gas?
Stop the oil giants. Ask your state legislators.
And during the next several weeks, as the measure moves through the House and Senate process, both sides are expected to spend thousands of dollars in radio, TV, and newspaper ads trying to win your support. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
Lonnie Benjamin and Harold Hicken were supposed to know something about what had gone on at police headquarters after the Taylor family was arrested. But the two officers never got to testify in court. They took the Fifth Amendment, and then they were fired by Mayor Fulmer.
Montgomery police officers have a duty to tell courts and district attorneys and grand juries anything they know about a case that they're involved in.
The mayor says they were fired for refusing to testify, but the record clearly indicates that they were ready to testify at the time they were fired.
Carroll says Benjamin and Hicken were fired just for exercising their right against self-incrimination. The suit asks that the officers be reinstated with back pay. Benjamin was with the police force 12 years, Hicken with the force 14 years.
They don't want a whole lot. They just want to be able to finish their careers as Montgomery police officers.
I intend to fight their reinstatement to the last court of the final jurisdiction.
Susan Silvernail, WSFA TV News.
I've often said that the best farm bill that Congress could enact would be a balanced federal budget, because if I know anything about farmers, and I come from a farm family, it is that they want to be left alone. They don't want to be propped up. But they don't understand this kind of government that we've had for the last 35 or 40 years in Washington, D.C. Now, I've often observed that agricultural policy in America stands at the crossroads, and I think that's right. That's not just a political cliche. You look at where we are, where we've come from, and the Lord knows where we're headed, unless we get together some will and some courage to do what we know in our heart of hearts must be done.
For Tampa, as though they're coming, and they are not coming. Hey, that's a good kick into that wind. That's going to hit about the 5 and may stay out of the end zone if they get there, and they do. And they
watch the defensive line. Jets, Klein, number 98. They're just firing in. Cuglieri, number 95. They're both there. Klein on the initial way and hand the ball to Leon Perry.
And here's Stout, rolling, looking for that end zone. He's got it.
Tuck goes back. Perry's back there blocking for him. He's got plenty of time to throw the ball, and he just fires it to Joey Jones. Now that's Jeff Jordan.
On the 49, the fake to Cribbs, puts it up deep for Joey Jones. Jones there, makes the catch. It's first and goal to go.
Perry here comes along the line of scrimmage, but number 20, Joe Cribbs, knows that Perry sticks his head in for him. Why not do it for Perry?
Birmingham, the big break on the interception. The great catch by Joey Jones, despite the excellent coverage of Jeff George. Danny Miller in to add the extra point, and he's got it. And with 2:11 to go, third quarter.
And what we'll be doing in the next month, where we'll be trying to teach, and hopefully our players will learn the reasons and the way to win. All the intangibles, the fundamentals, tactics, the schemes, everything involved in winning.
Normally at this time, Phil Snow is sitting to my left. Tonight, he is to my right and way away in Auburn, Alabama. Spring training underway, just about to get started at Auburn, Phil, and that's what takes you to Auburn.
Yes, we were here today, Bob, to find out what Coach Pat Dye had to say to the news media about spring training. It is a very important spring training for Auburn this year because they have to develop very early with that kickoff classic coming up against Miami to kick off not only Auburn's football season, but the entire college football season. At the press conference today, Coach Dye said one offensive goal in the spring will be to develop that one thing that they can do well, something they can count on in a tight situation.
Offensively, I would like to think that we're going to come out of spring practice with a personality. When I mean a personality, you know, anybody that's got a personality has got one or two things that you can kind of that, you know, that kind of stands out. You know, he either is an offensively football team, you know, you're either a strong running team or you're a strong passing team, or you can run good inside, or, you know, you can take it outside or do something that, you know, in a predictable situation, people know what you're going to do, and you're able to do it anyway.
Pat Dye is with us live now. Coach, if, speaking of that dominant personality trait now, if you could have your choice of what you'd like your offensive team to do, what would it be?
Well, you know, we'd like to be a physical football team, one that can make a first down anytime you want to, and I guess the only way you can do that is be a running football team. We certainly hope that we can be the kind of team that people know where you're going to run and you still run it anyway. We're not going to be, you know, I hope dumb enough to try to run uphill all day long. We have ways and means to run away from defensive strengths, but you know, when we got in the 4-down zone last year, we really kind of were a hunt and peck football team, and we shouldn't have to be that way. We've got enough ability, enough talent to where we can balance up a defense and should be able to run anywhere we want to.
2 years ago, you came out with Randy Campbell as your quarterback. You learned that in the spring. Obviously, you want to do that again this year.
Well, we've got to start with Pat Washington, #1, because he's been our #2 quarterback for the last 2 years. Mike Mann has been #3, so he'll start out #2. But we've got 4, possibly 5 kids in there that we're going to take a look at this spring, and you know, try to come out of spring practice with a depth chart at quarterback. And I'd like to come out of spring practice with one that's definitely ahead, and not one that we're going to go with as our #1 quarterback, and then have a #2 quarterback and #3. So it's so much easier to work them like that.
Okay, spring practice begins for Auburn on Friday. Dave Cody is here with us, and there's been some developments with Oscar Gamble, Montgomery's professional baseball player. David, can you fill us in on that?
Phil, Oscar Gamble will be wearing Yankee pinstripes once again. The Montgomery native signed a new 2-year contract with the Yankees today that could pay him up to $500,000 this year and $500,000 next year. Oscar played last year with the Yankees. He then declared himself a free agent, and he apparently now has come to terms with the Yankees. They perhaps came up with the best offer. In any case, Oscar has rejoined the club for the remainder of spring training. There's an old saying, like fine wine, things get better with age. Well, in the case of our next story, it's basketball players. Friday night at Carver Gym in Montgomery, former Carver Wolverines and former Booker T. Washington Yellow Jackets were reunited on the basketball court.
We have wanted them. We have wanted them. They have fallen at our feet. They have fallen at our feet. They must not ride. They must not ride. For the Lord's our shepherd. The Lord our shepherd. We shall not want. We shall not want. Hubba, hubba. Hubba, hubba.
They came in all shapes and sizes, and from all walks of life.
I figured I'd come out here to see if I could pull some teeth on the opposing team.
Stars of yesteryear at Booker T. Washington and Carver High Schools assembled on the same floor once again.
Some of the guys here haven't played ball in around about 5 or 6 years, so most we are for fun, but we do want to win.
You wouldn't mind having Andre Bruce on your team now? Well, Lord, I have Andre Payne, a whole bunch on the play against this bunch here.
Except for a couple of run-ins with yours truly, the cameraman, and except for a couple of run-ins with each other, this basketball benefit game featured plenty of good play. And it was obvious the crowd got its money's worth.
Show spirit for Booker T. Washington. Let them know that we're still alive.
Booker T. Washington's alumni came out on top, 98-90. But there was another winner.
Really, we're doing it to raise money for the Carver High School. We're trying to get some air conditioners in.
Young and old alike can be thankful for that.
The NIT has semifinal action tonight in New York. It'll be Michigan against Virginia Tech in the first game, and then Southwest Louisiana and Notre Dame in the late game. Dave Cody will have those results for you. One other item, the singing group Alabama will be the Grand Marshal or Grand Marshals for the Winston 500 on May 6th here in Talladega, Alabama. This is Phil Snow with the sports from Auburn. Bob?
Thanks a lot, Phil. We look forward to Dave Cody wrapping things up again tonight at 10 o'clock. We'll be back and have a first...
What is Goldfinger's first name? What color is the danger flag in auto racing? What 2 countries border the Dead Sea? Those are just 3 of the thousands of questions in Trivial Pursuit, the hottest board game of the year, maybe ever. Electronic games, of course, require nimble fingers. Trivial Pursuit requires a nimble mind, and Douglas Kiker has one.
We're constantly sold out, can't keep it in. All the time we have bribes. It's crazy.
As soon as it hits the shelf, it's gone.
We have probably 30 to 40 calls a day for it.
This is it. No electronic joysticks, no hungry Pac-Men, just an old-fashioned board game with 6,000 questions, all of them trivial, ranging from sports to science. Answer correctly and move around the board. People playing against people.
Hey, what was Jimmy Carter operated on while he was serving as president?
What was this? Hemorrhoids? I never knew that.
Who wrote The Maltese Falcon? How many yards are there in a mile? Trivial Pursuit sells for $25 to $40, depending on where you buy it. Expensive, and yet stores cannot keep it in stock. The American manufacturer, Cell Show and Writer, will soon be turning out 50,000 games a day. By December, if this keeps up, they will have sold perhaps as many as 20 million sets. The company's mainstay, Scrabble, sold 5 million in its best year. Marketing Vice President John Nason.
We do get blank checks in the mail, and people send a blank check and say, just fill it out and send me, X number of games. I wouldn't send a blank check to anybody, but that's how badly they want it.
It's nice to come back and have the toy industry at our knees.
Sales of Trivial Pursuit have made multimillionaires out of the 3 Canadians who invented it. There are 2 of them down at the end of this New York City bar. John Haney, on the right, a former hockey player, and his brother Chris Haney, an ex-newspaper man. What else?
I couldn't find my Scrabble game, and I went out and I bought one, and I got back to the house, and I said to Scott Abbott, this is the 6th game of Scrabble I buy. There's got to be some money in this thing. Why don't we invent a game? What would it be about? He said, I don't know, trivia? And 45 minutes later, it was done.
What is a California long white? It's a potato.
Who was that woman that showed up at Andropause Tuno? That's what I want to know, and that'll be in our next edition, folks. Right. Actually, we're bringing a Soviet edition, and we're going to call it Try to Predict the Past.
They came to New York to continue to cash in on the craze, negotiating with ABC and over dinner with NBC about network shows based on Trivial Pursuit. Who confronted criminals with this line? I arrest you in the name of the crown. Sergeant Preston of the Yukon.
The popular trivia, especially sports trivia among beer drinkers.
Stroh's Beer might want some of the action. Stroh's man, Peter Farner.
We'd like to make an initial order of 30,000 units. And from there, I think, the next order is either, 0, or the next order is 300, 400, 500,000 units. We have to buy all our...
Why is this game so popular? Is it because people are having fun again, competing against each other instead of a computer? Is it a diversion from Beirut, from politics? Inventor Chris Haney.
There's a wistfulness, it's the past. That's all you can buy in life is memories, as far as I'm concerned. And we're sort of selling the memories back. Hey, not too bad, eh?
Douglas Kiker, NBC News.
And Israel and Jordan border the Dead Sea.
Roads in determination for their own fate, and I think it comes down to a very simple choice. Not a simple choice, but it's I think the choice that's available to farmers today, and that is freedom on the one hand to utilize their resources and their crops, their acres, and everything that they have available to them on the one hand, and to produce those crops, and set what crops they want to produce for the marketplace.
The call nationwide for a heart donor went out yesterday morning for her, and we're hopeful that within the next few days or a few weeks she will be able to get a heart transplant. We desperately need to have money to support the heart transplant program at the university. In the coronary care unit at the university. So she is unable. After that's done, blood samples and, if possible, a biopsy of a lymph node must be sent to the appropriate transplant center from someplace outside Alabama or from Alabama, and yet Mrs. Foshee not be the one to match up with one of the
This year, and I hope they don't discover and get all that delegates away from him and gave him all the govern there. That's the reason Humphrey was not nominated president. He lost by 11 votes. Wow.
Very reminiscent of
out of Southern California.
Yeah, residence for 2 days from Los Angeles.
Okay.
And
great. And I got the TV out there. I'll be shaking hands.
Okay, you need to back line on this.
You folks from, you say New York City? Oh, California.
Justine and Jason, 18 and 15 respectively, have spent the past few years co-starring in hit television series. Now they're expanding their horizons to the stage. The change is not only that of a new vehicle, stage versus television, but also a new acting medium, drama versus comedy. Not an easy feat.
Number one, you're on a stage set, not a television set. It's a very intricate play. It's very well written, and in fact, it's as interesting to research all the references, all the literary references in the play as it is to act in it.
And Justine has had to do a lot of work on her character. She's the leading lady in a play about mental patients who are working through their problems. So far, she and the rest of the cast have received rave reviews from the Birmingham press, who say the cast has taken the serious subject of mental illness and given it just the right blend of humor and drama. But the play is a three-Bateman affair. The two actors' father, Ken, directs it.
I like working with my dad. He's a director by the name of Kent Bateman on the stage. There's a director-actor relationship. There's no favoritism.
Journey to the Day has drawn packed houses to 12 performances, so two have been added, Saturday and Sunday night at the Town and Gown Theater in Birmingham. Lois Russell, WSFA TV News.
Most workman compensation cases are settled with no problem, but sometimes there's a conflict between the worker and employer. Personal injury attorney Tyrone Means handles a lot of those cases.
Certainly, we find that in many cases, especially when a lawsuit is filed, an employee may find themselves in the unemployment lines as a result of filing a claim for workers' compensation.
Some lawyers think there should be a law protecting the workers from dismissal. Others think employers should retain the right to dismiss for any reason. Attorneys for cotton mill worker Huey Meeks say that's not fair.
This is a case where a man was fired from his job only because he filed a claim under the Workmen's Compensation Act. Law in Alabama says that if he does that, the employer could fire him. We think that's wrong, and that's what we're trying to change.
Alan Livingston, a defense lawyer representing the defense, says there's another side to the issue.
It's the position of the defense bar that employees have the right to change their jobs whenever they want to, and so do the employers. It's a mutual right. The employee is not required to stay there. He may move when he so desires, and it's an equal right.
Attorneys on both sides of this issue, the defense bar and the Trial Lawyers Association, say a ruling in this case, no matter how the ruling goes, will have special impact on all non-union employees in the state of Alabama. A ruling from the court is expected in several months. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News reporting.
Biopsy of a lymph node must be sent to the appropriate transplant center from someplace outside Alabama or from Alabama of the heart.
Is it of the actual muscle tissue?
So the actual muscle tissue, it just ceases to work appropriately. It doesn't squeeze and contract the way it should. Her heart is just sort of fluttering like that instead of big, strong squeezes. It's just like that. She's on 2 of those such medications. She's in the coronary care unit at the university. So she is unable, after that's done, blood samples and, if possible, a biopsy of a lymph node must be sent to the appropriate transplant.
We've got Mr. Kendrick representing the plaintiff, and I was about to say the administrative action as such is defined.
Administrative action. A clear, common sense reading of this language. If the director had decided this issue.
There'll be a lot of talk in 1984 about a 1985 Farm Bill, but there ain't going to be no 85 Farm Bill written in 1984. It's just not going to happen. I think the one thing you can say from looking at the presidential candidates is, regardless of who's elected on November the 6th, if you take the statements that have been made at face value, the 1985 Farm Bill is going to be, or appear to be, less costly than the 1981 Farm Act is.
After near death last week, the administration's property tax bill was given a new breath of life today. The House voted 77-24 to send the bill on to the Senate. The change in how the House voted primarily hinged on the nearly 24 members of the Black Legislative Caucus. Caucus Chairwoman Yvonne Kennedy says the caucus changed its position after her 20-minute conversation with Governor Wallace last night, in which she says now both sides conceptually agree about the caucus's goals. One of the major changes in the property tax bill is a minimum $25 property tax on homes regardless of size or exemption. Otherwise, if you own a home worth $40,000 or less, you won't feel any of these new proposed taxes. The new taxes apply to more expensive homes. As an example, the owner of a $100,000 home would have to pay an extra $36 a year. For business property, if you own a business worth $200,000 or less, no new taxes. Again, the taxes apply to businesses worth more than that. A $400,000 business, for example, if registered in the name of a corporation, would pay $480 in additional taxes. That same business registered in the name of an individual, and the taxes would be $240. The third category of land is agricultural and forestry. The exemption for any new taxes applies to land worth up to $500,000. The new taxes apply to more valuable land. As an example, a $1 million piece of property registered in the name of a corporation would have $600 in new taxes. The same parcel in the name of an individual would be charged an additional $300. On personal income tax, the governor's proposal would raise the state tax rate from 5% to 6%, simply. Both of these proposals now go to the Senate, and if they're approved there, would then be voted on by the public in November. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
Mathis. Respectfully, George C. Wallace, Governor.
Mr. President. Senator from any discussion. Motion by Senator from Russell.
Class 1 municipality in which horse racing is approved by the voters thereof, it is necessary and desire
I take into consideration indirect revenue from hotels, from people traveling, gas, food, and so forth, restaurants, things that would need to be construction. The potential is
Excuse me one
I came to eat.
And there's a plaque that goes with it, and Gwen is going to leave this award up here so that you can come by and see it, and I think Bob's going to leave his. And that's the end of my program.
Former Florida quarterback Wayne Peace had the starring role, but there would be no curtain call. Stallions defensive tackle Jackie Klein out of Alabama sacks Peace for a safety on only his second play as a pro quarterback. It's 3-2 Tampa Bay in the second quarter. The Stallions come back with a 65-yard 11-play drive. Quarterback Cliff Stout tumbles into the end zone. Stout completed a 2-point conversion pass to Joy Jones, and Birmingham was back in front 10-3. Wayne Peace must have gotten over his first game jitters in the locker room at the half. He brings Tampa Bay back to within 4. Peace to Marvin Harvey, and it's 13-9 early in the second half. The play of the game, Cliff Stout drops back for the home run. Joy Jones, the 5'8", 158-pound receiver, is downfield, makes an unbelievable grab at the Tampa Bay 2. The replay shows the Bandits' Jeff George had excellent defensive position. Jones looked the ball into his hands perfectly. From there, Leon Perry bulled in from the 1. Joe Cribbs later scored from the 2. The Stallions' 27-9 win was their 4th in a row, leaving them in sole possession of second place in the Southern Division. In another USFL game, Michigan steamrolled past the Houston Gamblers 52-34. Michigan quarterback Bobby Hebert threw for a record 444 yards. One of his 4 touchdown passes was to former Alabama running back Lenny Patrick, who also added 2 rushing touchdowns in by far his best performance as a professional. Dave Cody, WSFA TV Sports. "26-year-old Deborah Moore of Montgomery is a second-degree black belt and the 1983 National Women's Champion of Taekwondo. She compares her sport to gymnastics, boxing, and ballet.
You have to be limber, stretched out, balance. You have to have coordination, and it builds it if you do not have it. It's just like a boxer. You have to have timing. Like you have to see a technique coming, you have to counter. So your mental attitude is just really open and constantly flowing. Not what I've got to do, is what I have to do.
Dedication is Deborah's strongest asset, says her instructor, Mr. Yun Chung. She trains 5 days a week for an hour and a half a day. But building confidence was the first thing she learned in Taekwondo.
Confidence, that's the main point. Then physical shape, the second point. And third one is if they have a physical shape and confidence, they can use self-defense.
Students of Taekwondo also learn respect. Poor sportsmanship results in disqualification.
There's so much respect in it. I mean, I really get a kick out of watching little children and thank you, sir, yes, sir, to each other. And that's just something you just don't see.
Perhaps you were thinking a woman's place is in the home.
I can compete in this sport because there are a lot of women that like it and compete in it, so it gives me an opportunity to. If there are very few women in it, that means I would have to compete with men. And so this way, there are more and more women coming into it, so we have our own section of this competition. So I compete against women, not men.
We think that's past the 100 million mark.
Well, if there's that much out there, and this amateur program's been going on for...
This handout here kind of sets out some of the things that we...
Give me a couple.
And now, any wiring harnesses that Taiwan sends into the United States, they will be subject. I don't know that this is going to do a lot to help national industries, because 5%, when you're talking about 85 cent an hour labor rate, is not really that much. But to me, it's kind of symbolic. I think that there are things going to happen now that's going to protect American jobs. And to me, it's something that's a great step in the right direction.
Essentially appointed by him could do without Congress.
And this is the old saying, forever and ever, what we're going to do is help the third world and emerging nations build up their economy so that they can be our customers. I'm sure everybody's heard that. Well, we've been proven wrong on that about 100% of the time.
Teams began arriving in Montgomery this afternoon for the four-day tournament. The Blue-Gray staff was already hard at work stringing rackets for the players. Southwest Louisiana opens the tournament tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock against Tennessee and the nation's #1 ranked player Paul Anacone. The Ragin' Cajuns held a practice in the brisk winds that swept across the Lagoon Park complex. Their coach feels the SEC teams are the teams to beat.
Of course, Auburn, I believe, going into the tournament has the highest ranking in the country, and Tennessee's very close to them. I think one of them's maybe 8 or 9 in the country, the other one's 14. And then, there's really, what you're going to see here, from what I can tell, 9 or 10 teams are either ranked in the top 20 in the country or are mentioned in the top 25.
There are 16 college teams entered in the Blue-Gray tournament, making it the third largest college tournament in the entire country. But tournament director Jackie Bushman says if Montgomery comes through with enough community support, the field could even be enlarged next year.
If Montgomery supports this, and like they usually do with the Southern hospitality they've always shown, we have a chance next year of having the second largest college tournament in the country.
Alabama's first match is against South Carolina tomorrow afternoon at 3. Auburn opens play Friday morning against Duke at 8:30. Dave Cody, WSFA TV Sports.
I don't know that this is going to do a lot to help national industries, because 5%, when you're talking about 85 cent an hour labor rate, is not really that much. But to me, it's kind of symbolic. I think that there are things going to happen now that's going to protect American jobs. And to me, it's something that's a great step in the right direction.
For more than a year, the study of police-community relations in Montgomery has been underway. The Alabama Advisory Council to the Civil Rights Commission has been interviewing city and community leaders as well as people in the general public, asking them what they think is right and wrong about the Montgomery police force. The report is also expected to take into consideration actual incidents as well as opinions, such as shootings involving police and the impact those shootings have had on the public. When the council finishes reviewing the report today, it will be held for another 6 to 8 weeks for final revisions. When it is released, it is expected to not only define problems in police-community relations, but also to suggest ways to solve those problems. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
The president has listened to Mrs. Collier and her persistent complaints about the wire harnesses from Taiwan. And now the Reagan administration has tacked on a 5% ad valorem tax to all harnesses imported from Taiwan.
I don't know that this is going to do a lot to help national industries, because 5%, when you're talking about 85 cent an hour labor rate, is not really that much. But to me, it's kind of symbolic. I think that there are things going to happen now that's going to protect American jobs. And to me, it's something that's a great step in the right direction.
National Industries employs about 2,300 people at plants in Montgomery, Wetumpka, and Jackson, Mississippi, and will be adding another 200 employees in the next few days. But Mrs. Collier says that is not necessarily linked to the Reagan administration's ruling in favor of her company in the Taiwan trade dispute. I'm Bob Howell, WSFA TV News.
The list of past participants includes touring pros Sammy Rachels and this man, Jody Mudd. A year after playing in the Southeastern, Mudd challenged for the top prize in all of golf, the Masters green jacket. Nathaniel Crosby went on to win the United States Amateur Championship after playing in the Southeastern, and what a story that was. The list of past winners includes Steve Lowry of Alabama, and they still talk about John Morrow's course record 9 under par 63 that helped him win the individual title in 1982. Ironically, though, the mere presence of a non-participant in 1981 may have stirred the most interest in the Southeastern.
The year we had Jack Nicklaus come down and spend a couple of days with us, and just became one of the boys. And of course, he came down to see his son Jack III play out of North Carolina.
Past team champions include Ohio State, Florida State, Tennessee, and Alabama. In fact, Tide head coach Conrad Railing is one of the founders of the tournament.
You'd be amazed at the number of these youngsters who are now head professionals and working in golf. Some of them are in the golf business and selling equipment. And the memories that I have of just the greatest bunch of young men that you could ever think of, and I think that's a credit to the game of golf.
Tomorrow is the annual Celebrity Pro-Am, and yours truly is looking forward to hacking around with the likes of Pat Sullivan and Terry Beasley, Leonard Postero of Leonard's Losers, and Ray Perkins and Coach Pat Dye.
Committee members were being tugged in both directions with stories of lost jobs and unfair business practices. The oil refinery-owned stations like Crown, 7-Elevens, and Zippy Marts say this bill will put them out of business if they can't be allowed to sell their parent company's oil. But the service station owners say those refinery-owned stations are taking advantage of the lack of a middleman and are unfairly driving service stations out of business. One major change in the bill is a provision which would force oil companies to sell their gas to everyone at the same price. Representative Roy Johnson says this will have the effect of giving service stations the same low price reportedly enjoyed by the refinery-owned stations. In the House Ways and Means Committee, members voted for a general fund budget that is $7 million bigger than the budget offered by the governor. That brings the budget to almost $540 million. Committee Chairman Tom Coburn says the bigger budget spends extra money uncovered in new projections based on more optimistic outlooks on the economy. The extra money is absorbed by prisons, mental health, and the state troopers. The committee held off voting on the proposed pay raise for state employees. The governor proposed an 8% raise, but Representative Earl Mitchell worked for more. He failed at matching the teacher's proposed 14%, but is hoping that his latest request of 12% can be met. The committee is looking for ways to get extra money to fund the higher raises. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
Probably evaluation, but what bothers me, they've got
work training centers in the state. I have not built those work training centers, being reduced from $62.9 million down a minute ago in response to Pete's question, and I'm going to amplify
that now when the major oil, this thing has caused me a lot of concern, and I'm very interested and very
perhaps because of this inability to compete, we may be able to get out of a few leases. I'm not really sure about that. And this last comment, a few comments that I have are mostly
59.
The votes on budget isolation were counted this afternoon, and the Secretary of State did get the additional signature needed to certify them. But this doesn't mean an end to the disagreement over the legality of the vote.
We will send this to the governor's office at this time and let the governor have an opportunity to add his name to this certification if he wishes. But the code only requires, as you're well aware, that the Secretary of State, the Attorney General, and/or the Governor join in this official certification, and we have done that in compliance with the ministerial duties which are imposed upon us by the Code of Alabama.
But Governor Wallace is not going to sign the certification, nor does he plan to proclaim the results of the budget isolation vote. That is, unless a Montgomery Circuit judge tells him to. This afternoon, the governor sent Judge Gordon the results of the vote: 197,464 yes and 62,115 no, and asked the judge for further instructions. Judge Gordon has asked attorneys for all parties involved to file further written arguments in the case by Friday. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
Is October. We're talking about in October 1983, but it will be based on the previous year's taxes. We won't have to come back here.
9 ayes and no nays, Senate Bill 371 to the report. Senator Barrett, Senator Holmes.
Hugh Thompson at Auburn and Mr. Bushman here have evidently got together and decided to go with a big-time first-class event, which this is, and there wasn't anything like this last year. There's one other event in Corpus Christi, Texas that is similar to this, but this is more geared, it's in our area in the South.
Everybody asked me. Who said that? Some guy, my brother did. To do, so happy to do it.
Do you have a restaurant? So much money off that one little statement. That's what I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna get rich saying, "Where's the beef?" or something like that.
Only question I ever heard anybody ask me. Who said that? Some guy, my brother did.
They're going to be heading over to Anderson, South Carolina with a complete couple of truckloads, 18-wheelers full of non-perishable items, full of clothing, anything you folks can donate. We already have it set up through the Salvation Army over in South Carolina. The Civil Defense Office has sent word what the Central Alabama area residents are doing, and they're tickled to death.
All right, come on. Be careful, you're about to cross the road, okay?
No, I can hardly see where I'm going.
Yeah, I know you did. I got it. You can? Okay.
Well, I think we ought to find out those that are opposed to it, what specific language defects they thought it contained, and I think we ought to try to accommodate it. I don't think we ought to take away from the true meaning of the constitutional amendment, but I think we can find that some people would have voted with us if there had been a very clear language in the amendment that would have guaranteed there would have been no forced participation in prayer by those that didn't want to participate in it.
Two federal agencies are tracking down information on a fake medical school in the Dominican Republic, which has passed out diplomas to some so-called doctors in this country. And at least one of those people with a degree from the Dominican school is here in Alabama. Executive Director of the State Board of Medical Examiners, Larry Dixon.
The list of 100 people have already been uncovered, one of whom holds a legitimate Doctor of Osteopathy degree in Alabama. Why he would have gone to the trouble and expense to get a medical degree when he can practice medicine. He's not located in Alabama. He lives in another state, but he has a current DO license here. Why he would have gone to this trouble, I do not know, but he is on the list.
State medical investigators are looking into the backgrounds and credentials of all foreign doctors, trying to find out how many of them may be frauds. Those found to be holding fraudulent medical degrees could face federal felony charges. The director of the Dominican school is now serving a sentence in a federal penitentiary in connection with the scam, and more charges may be filed against him later this year. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News reporting.
One of the protections you buy when you get auto insurance is liability coverage. Representative Beth Marietta of Theodore would like to see the state increase the least amount of liability insurance you can buy. Right now, the least you can buy provides $10,000 for injury to one person, $20,000 for 2 or more people who are injured, and $5,000 for property damage. Ms. Marietta would like to see that go up to $25,000, $50,000, and $10,000.
Why do you want to raise the minimum liability?
Simply inflation. The last time we raised them was in 1965. That's 19 years ago. And if we're going to have minimum limits and require them when you have a wreck, then they need to be compatible with the prices of cars and medical bills today.
Yes. What's the motivation for this bill?
Well, I think it's mostly trial lawyers wanting this bill because they get between 33 and 50% for everything that they collect from the insurance companies, and they're pushing it real strong, and it's not going to do anything but cost the average income people's insurance to go up and the poor people's insurance to go up.
Clerk will unlock the machine and
vote aye. Vote aye, everybody.
The House is almost evenly divided on the issue, and that showed up in a series of close votes in which the House even switched positions at one time. The House finally put off any more action until at least next week. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
Indefinitely postponed.
Dumbest thing you ever heard to hear that cost me about $18 more, and 100,000 of businesses of 200. That is something that does not go with industrial development in our state, because the first thing they're beginning to ask now, as never before, what about your educational system in Alabama? Well, so far we've been fortunate enough to be able to say we've got a good one as compared to other parts of the country who all fail, they say, in having what we ought to have. Not only Alabama, but every state in the Union. On the report made the Secretary of Education, Bell, was that all the states have come up failing and lacking in the educational structure from the kindergarten to the graduate doctoral level, and therefore, if we are to compete in the modern latter part of the 20th century and 21st century, American educational system is going to have to be vastly improved.
Until now, the Advisory Council has, at least publicly, been subdued in assessing any problems that may exist between Montgomery Police and the communities they serve. But today, group members said the problems are serious, and they won't be easily solved. For more than a year, the Advisory Council has been studying police-community relations in Montgomery. Dozens of people have been interviewed, from top city officials to people on the street. Now, what council members say has emerged is a strong feeling in some parts of the city that the police are, at very least, insensitive to the concerns of some citizens, particularly blacks and women. But the council members are quick to point out that they are talking of perceptions, public opinion. At the same time, some council members are concerned that their report must help solve the problem it defines and not wind up as more fuel for the fire.
It's painful. It's going to be painful for all of us involved. But hopefully out of that pain will come some reasoning. Out of that pain will come some realization that we're all in this together.
The report will probably not be complete for another 6 weeks or so. When it is released, its authors expect it to draw some fire, but they say the only way to solve the problem is to call the shots the way they see them. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.